ونستغفره ونؤمن به توكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له أما بعد. So today I'm going to talk about something a little bit different, which links to the topic of Palestine, but not directly. And what I want to talk about today is the issue of ummatic unity, being a part of the Ummah, being linked to the Ummah. Now, this topic of being part of the Ummah, why did I bring it up? When we think about the Muslim world in general, one of the problems I notice is that minorities living far away from the Muslim world tend to be cut off to some extent. The minorities that live far away from the Muslim world, they tend to be cut off from the rest of the Muslim world. So we're talking about the Ummah in general, right? And very often when we live as a minority, and this is especially true here in South Africa, but I've noticed this with other minorities as well. So I've noticed this, for example, when I spend time with Muslims from the USA and the UK, they have the same problem, that there is almost like the othering of Muslims from the Muslim world, that you don't see them as someone you're connected to. To give you some examples of this, very often, many of us will end up having stereotypes about Muslims from Muslim lands, negative stereotypes. So for example, there may be some kind of negative stereotypes about Arabs, right? That all Arabs are like this, or all Arabs are like that. Or a negative stereotype about people from Pakistan or Bangladesh. And these negative stereotypes, very often, they come about simply because we are not connected to that part of the world. We don't have a sense of brotherhood with the Muslims in that part of the world. We live in our own little bubble, our own little box. So imagine a Muslim who grows up in South Africa without ever traveling to a Muslim land, who just lives here, right? And all he knows is what he sees around him. And all that reaches him about other Muslims is hearsay, really, rumors and gossip. So his view of the Muslim world would be distorted. And I see this very often, that when we talk about Muslim countries, we tend to have an overly negative understanding of the Muslim world. I'm not saying there's no negatives, but I'm saying it's a lot more nuanced there. When you travel to the Muslim world, you'll find every land, there is good in it, and there are things that can be improved. But too often we are obsessed with the negatives of the Muslim world. And I believe that one of the reasons for this, right? I believe one of the psychological reasons why Muslims that live as minorities in these lands have this negative stereotype about the Muslim world is to justify to ourselves choosing to live in a non-Muslim country, right? To justify to ourselves, because technically it is mustahab to live in a Muslim land. It is recommended to live in the Muslim world. So how do we justify that we live in the non-Muslim lands? Many people, to justify it in their own minds, they create this picture that the Muslim world is a bad place. You don't want to go there. They're all bad people. We're safer here. It's more free over here. Right? This is a negative image we create in our own minds to justify being here at the expense of others. And one of the negative results of this is that when something bad happens in the Muslim land, instead of feeling attached to our brothers in that land, instead of feeling sorry for our brothers in that land, instead of feeling unity with them, you'll hear people saying, oh, they deserved it. You hear people saying these things, right? You hear people saying, oh, that land's full of sinners. That land's full of deviants. Those people aren't even real Muslims. They deserve what's happening to them. This is the kind of rhetoric that spreads in our community. And I believe it stems from this idea that we are, number one, disconnected from the Muslim world. Number two, because of that disconnection, we have created in our minds a negative stereotype about these lands and about these people. And as a result, because of this, we don't have this solidarity with the Muslim world. And this is dangerous. This is very dangerous. Now, the topic about hijrah and whether it's permissible to live in a non-Muslim country, that's a separate topic for a separate time that really will take up an entire khutbah. But putting that aside, no matter where we live in the world, Muslims should always have a sense of connection with the broader ummah. There should always be a sense of love for your brothers and sisters no matter where in the world they are. There should always be this. And the Prophet ﷺ had spoken about this in many ahadith. I'll just mention two today. The first one, the Prophet ﷺ said that the parable of the believers, when it comes to affection and mercy and compassion for each other, is like one body. We are like one body. When one limb aches, the whole body feels the pain and cannot sleep. So Rasulullah ﷺ, he creates for us a picture here, right? He builds a picture for us, a parable. And this concept of parables, it's found throughout the Quran and Sunnah. The Arabic word is mathal, right? You'll see this word mathal, it's used a lot in the Quran. Mathal means a parable. A parable is meant to draw a picture for us, something that we can relate to and understand, and that we can apply to the other. So the parable of the unity of the ummah, of the sense of ummatic unity, is that all Muslims, imagine them as one body. Right? Now look at your body. If you, for example, stub your toe, what happens? The whole body feels the pain. Right? From head to toe, you feel it everywhere. All you did with the smallest part of your body, you mistakenly kicked that table. Right? Everyone's had that experience, right? You mistakenly walk into the table with your little toe, and you feel that pain shooting throughout your body. You feel you can't relax because one small part of your body is in pain. Right? You can't relax. Maybe the smallest part of your body is in pain, but you can't relax. Your whole body feels it to some extent. The ummah is supposed to be like that. Anywhere in the Muslim world, if somebody is in pain, wherever you are, you're supposed to feel that pain. If something happens in Palestine, we should feel the pain. If something happens in Syria, we should feel the pain. If something happens in China, we should feel the pain. If something happens in India, we should feel the pain. But maybe what happened was by distancing ourselves geographically so far away from the Muslim world, maybe we are an amputated limb. And that's why we don't feel the pain. So you've got this ummah body stretching from North Africa all the way to Malaysia and Indonesia. And then cut off far away, there's this tiny amputated finger called South Africa. Maybe that's why when something happens to the rest of the body, we're still dead. We don't feel it. Because we're the ones that cut off, not them. We need to revive the sense of caring for the other. We need to have this in our hearts. This is a sign of Iman. That if you feel pain in your heart when Muslims anywhere in the world suffer, that is a sign of Iman. And if your heart is dead when Muslims in the world are suffering, that is a sign of hypocrisy. And even worse, if you are judging those Muslims, if you are making judgmental statements about those Muslims, if you are saying things like, oh, Allah is punishing them for their sins, then not only is your heart dead, I don't even know how to describe a heart like that. I don't think in the history of Islam, we hear of people saying stuff like that about other parts of the Muslim world, like what we see today. This is the result of othering Muslims from other parts of the world. That we end up not only not feeling the pain, but justifying that pain to ourselves. So we need to revive the sense that we are one body. And everyone needs to take a look inside their heart and ask themselves, do I feel the pain of my Muslim brothers and sisters? If not, something's wrong with me. Something's wrong with my heart. Something's wrong with my sense of brotherhood. And put aside all your negative stereotypes, the Arabs are like this, and Pakistanis are like that, and Indians are like this. Put aside all those negative stereotypes. Those are still your brothers and sisters in Islam. You should still have a sense of connection with them. Hadith number 2. The Prophet ﷺ said, the believers are like bricks of a building, strengthening each other. So the amazing thing over here is that whenever Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam speaks about ummatic unity, he uses parables. He always uses parables. Something we can relate to, something we can understand. So in this hadith it says that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the Muslims are like bricks in a building supporting each other, and he put his fingers like this. Right? He put his fingers like this, narrated in the hadith. He put his fingers like this and he said, this is how the Muslims are supporting each other. This is how they should be united. And the amazing thing with hadith is that the narrators don't just narrate what the Prophet ﷺ said, but they narrate his hand gestures, his facial expressions, anything that was relevant to the information they related. And so it's narrated in this hadith that he said the believers are like the bricks of a building, each part strengthening each other, and then he put his fingers together like this. So what does this mean? A brick on its own doesn't have much value, but put all the bricks together and you have a strong building that protects people. The Ummah is meant to be like that. Together we are strong, but when we are individuals on our own, when we are cut off from the Ummah, we grow weaker and weaker. And over the past 200 years, there was a major attempt to weaken the Ummah in this way. And many different things were done to weaken the Ummah and to break that building apart. The destruction of the Ottoman Empire was part of that. The establishment of Israel in the middle of the Muslim world was part of that. The division of the Muslim world into tiny little nation states that hate each other was part of that. The dispersion of Muslims as small minority groups all over the world that lack any political power was part of that. That there was a systematic move over the past 200 years to weaken the Ummah, because the enemies of Islam know that when the Ummah is together, they are strong like a building. And when the Ummah is divided, those bricks can't do anything on their own. And we see that now. That even though there are so many Muslim countries and so many wealthy Muslim countries and so many Muslim countries with armies, but each brick on its own is unable to solve the problem of Palestine. There has to be together. And really this hadith, even though it's talking about ummatic unity, if you think deeper about it, it's also informing us about the importance of the Khilafat. Think about it. How do you have everything together like that? There has to be a unifying political power to do that. Because as long as there's no unifying political power, this ummah will always be divided into nation states, and there will always be stereotypes about people from the other nation state, and there'll always be this hatred for Muslims who look different, or who live across the border, or who have some different madhab or something like that. That we need this ummatic unity, and we need a centralized leadership to enforce it. But until then, we have to find other ways, and one of the ways is to start with our own selves. What are we doing to be part of the Ummah? What are we doing to feel connected with the Ummah? So to go back to what we said in the beginning, we said that because we live as a minority, far away from the Muslim lands, and really many South Africans have never visited a Muslim country. Many of them have never visited Turkey or Malaysia or the UAE. Many have never visited these lands. All they know is hearsay and stories and gossip about these lands. And because of this, they have negative stereotypes about the people of these lands. And then when something happens in these lands, they'll say, oh, they deserve it. Because I heard that they're deviants. I heard that the people in that land are a deviant sect. I heard that the people in that land are all sellouts. I heard that the people in that land are all sinners. Right? So because we have these negative stereotypes, we end up not only having no sense of ummatic unity, but even worse, we end up judging entire countries based on hearsay and gossip and rumors. So my call today is for all Muslims, wherever you are in the world, to revive in your heart a sense of Ummah, to make yourself part of the Ummah. And in the second khutbah, I will give some practical steps on how we can do that. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Alhamdulillahi wahda wa salatu wa salamu ala man la nabiyya ba'da amma ba'd. Fa inna asdaqal hadithi kitabullah wa khayru hadi Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa sharrul umuri muhdathatuha wa kullu muhdathatin bid'ah wa kullu bid'atin dalalah wa kullu dalalatin fin nar. Number one, for anyone who can afford it, what I believe is the easiest and the quickest solution for developing a sense of the Ummah, but it's also expensive. Travel. Travel to the Muslim world. Travel to the Muslim world. Spend time with Muslims from other nationalities. Be part of their cultures for a while. Absorb their cultures. Live amongst them. See what their lives are like. This will break many, many stereotypes. And I've seen this happen so many times. That in general, you'll find the Muslims who are more connected to the Muslim world are the ones who are more well-traveled. Because they had a chance to break that negative stereotype in their mind. Now, a few years ago, a young brother in our community, he was telling me very bad things about Muslim countries, right? He had, again, the same ideas in his mind, and they're like this, and they're like that, and they're all sinners, and they're all sellouts, and, only the South Africans still have real Islam. And then that brother had to, for work reasons, was forced to move to Malaysia for 3 months. He came back a different man. He came back a completely different man. He came back with a sense of connection to the Ummah. And he told me, we were wrong. He said we, right? We were wrong about the people of the Muslim world. There's good people there. There's Islam there. They have a better culture than us. They have this good practice and they have that good practice. And his mind was blown by what he saw. And I've seen people have this experience in Turkey. I've seen people have this experience in the Arab lands. That we have so much negative ideas about them. And some of it comes from racism. The idea, let's face it, that some Muslims have of Indian South African Muslims being superior to others. Right? Some of it comes from nationalism. Right? Some of it comes just from rumors. And some of it comes from justifying being in the West. But if you travel and you spend time in these lands, you can kill many of these stereotypes. And I myself had to do that, right? For the bulk of my life, I had very negative stereotypes about Turks. And last year and this year, I visited Istanbul twice. And I can tell you, it killed many of my stereotypes. I met some of the most beautiful and righteous people I've ever seen. I've seen cultural practices that I wish we could import to our lands. I've seen things in those lands of real Islam and real Iman that I didn't even know existed. And for me, having traveled to many different Muslim countries, every time you travel to another Muslim country, it broke some stereotypes. And it created a sense of solidarity with the people of that land. So if you can travel, travel. But don't travel as some kind of privileged tourist who's looking down upon the people. Go and visit people in their homes. Go to the small little shops in the corner that only the locals visit. Go and be a part of their culture for a few days. Go and immerse yourself in their cultures. That is how you really learn about the people. Not by just staying in some 5-star hotel and looking down upon everyone. Number 2, even if you can't travel, meet people from other parts of the world who either migrated to your land or online, and make friends with them and learn about them. You will break many stereotypes. Right? I keep hearing negative stereotypes, for example, in our community about Pakistani Muslims. Right? But if you had to actually reach out and spend time with people from Pakistan, whether it's the local immigrants here or people who still live there, you'll find many righteous people amongst them. And this will break many of your stereotypes. It's the same with Arabs. There's a lot of negative stereotypes about Arabs in our community. And some of the most hospitable and generous and righteous people I have met were Arabs. Just to give you an example of just how bad our negative stereotypes are. When I was in Makkah for Hajj, some of the South Africans sitting with me were saying that these Arab sheikhs, their food is haram, and Allah is not going to accept their good deeds. But those same sheikhs they were pointing to were waking up for tahajjud every single day of that trip, and they themselves never prayed tahajjud a single day of that trip. Yet they couldn't see the good in those people because those negative stereotypes were enshrined in their mind so much that these people eat haram, and these people are sellouts, and these people have no piety. But if you actually spend time with them, you'll be amazed that in every nation where there is Islam, they are righteous people. We need to do away with these negative stereotypes. What else can you do to be connected with the Ummah? Stay connected with the news from the Muslim world. Have access to some news channels from the Muslim world. Or even on-the-ground sources that we now have through social media. So you can see for yourself what is happening in these lands and what the people of these lands are like. because you may hear negative stereotypes, like the people of Palestine are all sinners, right? This is a negative stereotype that's in our community, na'udzubillah. But when you actually watch the videos from Palestine, what do you see? All you see is iman. All you see is tawakkul. All you see is people who have a higher level of yaqeen than any of us. And that will break that stereotype. If you actually take the time to look at them and see them, then you will break those stereotypes. Another way to break these stereotypes is to donate to global causes. If anything goes wrong anywhere in the Muslim world, do what you can for them. If you can give money, give money. If you can volunteer and go, volunteer and go. And alhamdulillah, we have many great organizations here in South Africa that send teams of volunteers to do relief all over the world. If you have an opportunity, join them. Go with them and be in these lands. You know, when the earthquake happened in Turkey, some of my friends went there to assist. And when they reported back to us about what it was like, they reported mainly on the iman of the people. They said they never saw iman like that in their life from the people who were affected by the earthquakes. When you actually go and you help people and be with people, you build that ummatic unity with them. You begin to see them as human. You begin to see them as your brothers and sisters in Islam. And all of these negative stereotypes get broken. Finally, I said travel, immerse yourself in other Muslim cultures. I said make friends with Muslims around the world, break down racial barriers, break down barriers of madhab, break down barriers of nationalism, make friends with Muslims in other parts of the world, stay up to date with the politics of these lands, donate to these causes, and finally, most importantly, make dua for them. Don't be selfish in your du'as. Don't be selfish in your dua. Some people only make dua for themselves and their families. Make dua for the Muslims all over the world. Because everywhere in the world there are different challenges. And everyone needs help. Yes, some lands there are wars. And in some lands there are tyrants. And in some lands there are natural disasters. And in some lands there is poverty, mass poverty and unemployment. Every land has its challenges. Our land has its challenges, right? So make dua for the people of the world. The more dua you make for others, then the more closer you feel to them. Because these aren't just strangers to you. These are people you actually raise your hands for and pray for. And that creates a unity between you and them. So we ask Allah to allow us to rid our hearts of any spiritual diseases that affect unity. We ask Allah to rid our hearts of this sense of arrogance towards other Muslims and stereotyping other Muslims and racism towards other Muslims and nationalism towards other Muslims. We ask Allah to unite the Ummah and to remove all barriers between unity. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us one nation, a strong building, to make us one body that feels the pain of each other. We ask Allah to forgive us for any time in the past that we thought negatively about other Muslims. And we ask Allah to unite our hearts and to soften our hearts and to make us from those who care about each other. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, to help the Muslims of Palestine, to grant them victory, to remove all of the tyrants from the Muslim lands, to remove any sense of tyranny from the Middle East, and to make that a land of peace and justice and Islam, and to restore power and dignity to the Muslim world. Allahumma ansur mujahideen fi kulli makan, Allahumma ansur mujahideen fi Palestine, Allahumma ansur mustad'afeen fi Palestine, Allahumma izz al-Islam wal muslimin, Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana wa fil akhirati hasana wa qina adhaban nar. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun al mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.